workshop is titled Wardrobe Stories. Actually, let me back up and tell you a little bit about myself. Actually, my background training is in cultural anthropology. I did this at Yale University. And I want to say that when I first did this dissertation, I wanted to do a dissertation on fashion, and I think the department looked at me like I was a strange animal. And so what I did was I found amazing people to work with who really, really encouraged me, and I did my dissertation in New York City. And then after I finished that, I started at Parsons teaching in 2010, so it's been quite some time. As Elke mentioned, helped to build the MA in Fashion Studies program. I'm in the Department of Art and Design, History and Theory. I wish I was in the Fashion Design program and could make things. I'm terrible at making anything. So, but I do a lot of history and theory. In our department, all of the undergraduates who come to Parsons end up taking history and theory courses, foundational courses through the department. And through the years, I really have been teaching a course called New York Fashion on the history of not just fashion and design, but it's really the history of the whole city. You know, think of New York. I don't know, you think of the big fashion names, but what if you were to imagine Coney Island as the fashion capital? Yes, of the city, you know, turn of the century. So it's a course on its different geographies. It's a course on the different spaces of the city where fashion was made, where fashion was looked at. There is still a garment district there that I ended up writing a whole book about the history of the garment district. So that's New York fashion. And then I have a real interest in the global. And so for many years I taught a course called Ephemera. And Ephemera was all about New York is one place that's connected to the fashion that's being made and sold there is connected to so many networks of people around the world. And I see that all embodied in the materiality of your clothes. All the threads, the material, the cotton that's grown, the tucks, the way it's sewn, the buttons, the zipper, where does everything come from? And so New York brought me to other places, and mostly throughout Asia, looking at how it's actually being made. And you know, what is that funny line between design and labor? I see them actually as one and the same thing. It's a collectively done, but globally around the world. And yet we only see it as like two things, you know, design on one side, labor on the other, in different geographies, but really at every step of the way, it's all very interconnected. And so I love playing around with these ideas of design, labor, and creativity. All of my projects have involved a lot of big field work, requiring me to travel to other places, and then the pandemic hit. And guess what? I could go nowhere. Everything disappeared. Everything disappeared. And so I think this is when I turned more introspectively, more reflectively, and started to think about what it is that I'm doing and what is the field site of my closet. What's actually in there? And this is how I came up with this idea of wardrobe studies. Actually, originally it was inspired by an essay by a colleague of mine who's now at the University of Pennsylvania. Her name is Shannon Mattern, and she's a professor of media studies. And she wrote a very, very short essay called Closet Archive in the Places Journal some years ago. Shannon has always been interested in data systems and media forms of knowledge that are found in hardware shoved into a closet. The door is shut. She's interested in technology. She's interested in history of libraries. So she's interested in collections of things that have been put away, stored, and she asks, what kind of archive actually is this? For me, I read that article, and my first instinct wasn't hardware and data and technology. It was clothes, and it was about clothes and memories and stories. And how do I put that, what does that actually represent? It took me on this kind of wild journey. I didn't know where to begin. I had like a 2-tome volume intro to interior design history. I opened up that book and I found inside the title, Closet, Wardrobe. So I started to first think about it as an architectural space, a physical space. And it took me all the way back to the 1200s, France, where this word wardrobe first appears. The wardrobe is carried by the king through his lands. It contains within it his luxuries, his treasures, his money, and it followed him. And then by 14th century, it enters the English language. So this is kind of the etymological history. And eventually, it becomes a room with a box inside of it. And this room is found in the innermost reaches of the house, next to the bedroom, a chamber, a small room next to the bedroom. And it becomes a place for the private display of collections of the wealthy. Right? It's the cabinets of curiosity, things that have been collected throughout colonial lands, and private forms of knowledge embodied in objects and natural artifacts displayed privately next to the bedchamber. I thought this was quite fascinating. What forms of knowledge? Cabinets of curiosity, these are the this is the history of the birth of the modern museum, okay? And I was fascinated by the history of this practice of collecting. What actually was it about? Eventually, it's not just a place for collecting, it's a place for meditation and study. So in medieval Italy, it was called solitudo. It's a place for quiet, one to be alone, and for one to be quiet. And it's a place where, I keep on looking at you before, because you said reflection. It's a place for reflection. It's a place to get dressed. It's a place for intimate thoughts. It's a place for illicit affairs. It's a place for secrets. It's a place of relationships between mistress and maid. It's a deeply, deeply intimate space, this closet. And then beyond the physical and architectural nature, I was fascinated by all the different kinds of metaphors. And I thought, what do we put in there? What do we keep in there? And what are the clothes that we keep in there? And what do the clothes actually come to represent? What do they embody? So I actually started to think of wardrobes as, it's kind of like the proto-museum of the self. What are we collecting? What are we saving? What are we throwing out? What are we keeping in there? And is there a way? Language is really, I read a lot about, these days I've been thinking a lot about language and the difficulty of language, translation and interpretation. And I was one of those kids who grew up with parents who spoke a different language, and then I'd have to show up to the teacher and explain what, you know, and kind of doing that back and forth. And there's so much that can't be explained. But as we already know, because all of you have a relationship with clothes and garments and fashion is a certain kind of language in and of itself. And I'm interested in what kind of stories it can tell. And I'm interested in expanding the narrative structure of what a story can be and how we can tell a narrative of history that we might not know of, that didn't exist before. What kind of an archive of the self is this, the wardrobe? So I'm asking all these different kinds of questions. This past year when I taught this course, so this workshop is kind of based a little bit on this course that I taught called Wardrobe Stories. I realized, of course, I'm not the only one thinking about wardrobes and closets. And so what I thought I would do today, just in this quickly, in this beginning, is to bring a little bit of New York here with you. And just to show you a couple of images of just like 2 or 3 different artists I came across just this past year. I'm just literally walking the city and finding out their interpretation of closet and wardrobe. Let me show you. This first image is an image from Shannon Mattern's piece. Different examples of this architectural space, this small room, or this wardrobe box, this piece of furniture. And I think in this photo on the right-hand side, she's trying to show you, correspondences, letters. Wardrobe is the clothes, the things that we keep in there. They speak of the interiority of our inner lives. And I think that's kind of fascinating. And here, this is an image also from her same essay. This is probably from Life magazine in the 1950s. And I couldn't give you the whole lecture today. But by this point in the 1950s, this is all of what is the closet, what is the wardrobe? It's about efficiency, it's about rationality, it's about organization, it's about morality and ethics tied with how organized you are. It's about time and labor, and leisure. So this is kind of an example of that. And this is something that a student pointed out to me, and it's literally only about 2 blocks from my office, and it had just gone up, and it's actually going to be taken down pretty soon. But this is by an artist named Jim Hodges, and the title of this piece is called Craig's Closet. And if you actually Google it, there's not actually much information there. So my class and I, we walked over, we had a look closely. Jim Hodges, he was born in 1957. I think he still lives in the city. And Craig, there's nothing online you can find about Craig, but what we can assume is that this is his partner, his longtime partner. If you look closely at it, it's made out of granite. It's been granite and bronze. It's been painted black. And the back side of it is just a wall that you can see your reflection within it. There's shirts, there's hangers, there's shoe boxes, there's a stack of CD cases. It's incredibly, incredibly detailed. And as we were sitting there, actually, let me mention, it's in a triangle. The building behind it is a former hospital. It's called St. Vincent's Hospital. And St. Vincent's Hospital, it's no longer a hospital, actually went bankrupt just a few years ago. But what St. Vincent's Hospital represents is, this is the site of the AIDS epidemic that began in New York. Okay. So this is a piece that was made, it's part of an AIDS memorial. And St. Vincent Hospital, historically in the US, always has served the poorest of the poor. It was in a neighborhood, in a neighborhood at that time that was full of artists, was full of a gay community, a queer community. It was a place for a lot of drugs way back when, and it was the heart of the AIDS epidemic. So its geographic location is really important. It's also the hospital when the Titanic sank and the bodies were brought to shore. The bodies were brought to St. Vincent's Hospital. It's the place that it helped with the cholera, turn of the century cholera outbreak. It's got a whole history. It's almost shocking to me that this hospital has disappeared. And it just sits there kind of quietly. There's no real market. And while we were looking at this, we realized in this triangle, there were a lot of folks there who use it as a site for memorialization. They're there mourning, quietly sitting in this beautiful triangle of a park. And we met one of them. We met an artist named Avram Finkelstein. He's a textile artist. And walked over and he talked to the class. And he told us that he knew Jim. So he'd be very happy. He was very pleased that students were looking at Jim's work. So we asked him a little bit about it, and not from Jim, from Avram. And Avram said that the only thing you really need to know about this piece is that when Jim created it, he intentionally recreated every single detail of this closet. And he doesn't want to have to explain its interpretation and meaning. It's enough for us to just stand there and take it in and remember every single detail of Craig's closet. And I have a quote from Jim Hodges. I couldn't barely find any information on this online, but I found one interview. And he says that one can catch a glimpse of themselves. He didn't want to explain the piece, but he says, quote, one can catch a glimpse of themselves in the work. And he also writes, narratives blossom whenever the doors swing open. The opening gives us a reminder and understanding of who we are, where we have been, secrets, and the dreams we hold. It was just so moving. So that's one piece that I'd like to introduce. Literally, this is another piece where I took my class. We were walking to a local gallery only 1 block away. We walk into a show, an exhibition space, and here is Camilla Carper's piece, Inside Out Closet. The hilarious thing is, while we were there, Camilla Carper, the artist, showed up. And the reason why is because this is her entire wardrobe. So if she wants to get dressed, she has to come and put it on. So it's actively in and out throughout the day. Camilla would come in. So this Camilla Carper, Inside Out Closet, born in 1990. I'm not sure about the pronouns. Maybe I'll use they. They are actually a fashion design major at Parsons. They finished and decided to go to continue on to get an MFA in fine arts. And basically, this is their entire wardrobe. it holds intimate childhood objects, it holds her ex's laundry in a hamper, it holds all kinds of fascinating things. Here's another part of it. And inside the clothing rack, deep within it, you can hear a sound. And what they put in is archival footage of her uncle, who was a dancer, who was also living with HIV and who had passed away. She found this VHS tape in his closet and is playing it. And I have a quote also from her. She says that inside this rack of clothing, it is the heart, the womb. That's what she calls it, the womb. And it's a space to listen to stories about queer love and loss. She says this is a piece of, this piece is a self-portrait of many, not just one. And she also writes, it's not about coming out, but it's about moving into, inside out. So not coming out, moving into. I thought it was a deeply fascinating piece. Maybe I'll just talk a little bit more of this one last piece, which is the artist Teresa Hakim-Cha, again another New York-based artist, born in 1951, passed away in 1982 under very tragic circumstances. She's Korean American, and her novel is called Dictee. I picked up this book in my 20s, I think because I'm Korean American and she's Korean American. And to this day, this book is probably the most puzzling book I've ever seen. Every single page is something different. It's written in multiple languages. I can't tell that it's written in first person, it's written in third person, it switches. There are multiple characters and multiple voices. Sometimes there are pages that have periods and commas and question marks. Other pages you don't know where the sentences begin or end. Sometimes it's typed out as text. Other times it's written in script. And the way that it's been interpreted by scholars is it's her feeling and way of expressing diaspora, the fragmented experience of diaspora. Her family is originally from Korea. They immigrated to San Francisco in 1963. She was 12 years old. And through time, she loses her mother tongue. She loses language. She takes on English, French, other languages. And I think for me, I wanted to introduce, it doesn't have anything specific to do with the wardrobe itself, the closet, but I was interested in bringing her into this space because I'm constantly searching for another way of writing. I mean, the title of this is called Wardrobe Stories. I'm interested in what a story actually is. For Teresa Hakim-Cha, the story could be a letter, it could be a prayer, it could be a eulogy, it could be as you read it, you don't know what genre it belongs to. And so, just like clothes can embody and express, I think, feelings and emotions and an inner dialogue and an interiority that we may not be able to express verbally. I think Teresa Hakim-Cha is trying to do this with her writing and her artistic practice and work. And in general, I'm interested in migration and in borders and what one brings and what one leaves behind. If you can imagine, I didn't bring it here, but there's a photographer named Richard Barnes who takes photographs of the clothes left behind in the arroyos from migrants crossing over from Mexico through the Sonoma Desert into the US, rivers and rivers of clothes. So migrants carry clean clothes in their backpack and right when they get to the border town, after making that arduous, really tough journey through the desert, strip, put the kumquats on, and enter across the border into the town. So what is, it's almost evidentiary. What is, like, do we read the prose as biography? Do we read it as evidence? Do we read it as something that lasts maybe longer than human life itself? There's all kinds of, important questions around life and death that I think we can ask, through clothing and its materiality. So I've done a lot of talking, maybe even more than 20 minutes. Yeah, so that's my little kind of lecture of the thinking that I had when I walked into this. So as promised, let's do some things that